What does motherhood teach us about leadership?
This idea that motherhood is leadership, leadership is motherhood, motherhood are leaders, mothers are leaders, the noun, the verbs, the adverbs, however you want to say it, those two need to be equated.
Welcome to Motherhood Advantage, the podcast exploring leadership intelligence developed through motherhood. For decades, we've heard about the motherhood penalty, but what about the motherhood advantage? In each episode, we talk with one extraordinary mother about how caregiving shapes the way they think, decide, and lead. Because motherhood is leadership. Hello. I'm Dr. Marie Rivera, and this is Motherhood Advantage. Today's guest is someone who has fundamentally changed the way we talk about partnership, labor, and equality inside the home. I am honored to welcome Eve Rodsky. She's a mother, an attorney, and a New York Times bestselling author of the groundbreaking Fair Play book and movement. Fair Play has sparked a global conversation about the invisible load that so many women carry, and it's offered a practical, research-based system for rebalancing domestic life. And her latest book, Unicorn Space, dives into the genuine need for everyone, including and especially mothers, to have a space or an interest in some time of their own. So in today's conversation, we'll explore the intersection of partnership, power, and parenting. Eve, I am so grateful you are here. Let's start with the same question that I ask all of my guests. What is a mother? How would you define her? And what does that role mean to you?
That's such a beautiful question. I got to hear some of your other guests answer, and I will say that I think mother is, to me, two things. It's a noun and a verb. And so I think to mother needs to be encompassed by men. That's my movement.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Tell me more.
And I think the noun of mother has had sort of a Madonna complex to it, where I think mothers are vilified for when they do something wrong, but they're also put on a pedestal. And I don't know if you remember that viral meme during the pandemic where people kept saying, mothers, you're just doing it all. I don't know how you're doing it. And they're like, we're not doing it. We're drowning. We need help. And they're like, we're so proud of you for doing it all. Just keep going. They're like, no, but we're not doing it all. We need help. And they were like, just keep on going. So I think to me, the noun has been always problematic, but I think the verb is so beautiful. To mother is something that we all can do. And because it's been gendered in a patriarchy female, it's much easier for women to do it. The idea of fair play, what we'll talk about, is that I've been working for over a decade now on trying to convince society that the next frontier of feminism or the next frontier of evolution of our society is going to require women to step into their full power outside the home. But to do that, we need to invite men into the full power in the home. And to me, that's the verb of mothering.
I love that. And that distinction with the noun and the verb. And as you've been doing this with the book and the conversations, what has that been like to be able to bring this conversation to the national stage? There may be some people that are just hearing about you and Fair Play, but there are so many people that are just excited to hear about your work, and me included, to have that invisible labor named and quantified and really just laid out in such an impressive way. And I will tell you, in my dissertation on leadership and motherhood, this factors very clearly, and just outlining what it is that mothers do and what all of those pieces are and how the leadership aspect plays in. So really, I'm wondering about that big conversation that you've been having and if there have been surprises along the way.
Well, I think the most important conversations are conversations like this, because I think so many of us tried to change systems, right? Fighting for paid leave or fighting for universal childcare. And we got there in the 1940s for like 2 years during the war. But since then, America especially has been pretty hostile towards mothers and towards women. And so my feeling was, as a lawyer, I could bring something a little bit different to the conversation, which is obviously work closely with people like you who have an audience and a voice to really change the way mothers look at their roles. And like you said earlier, very important P word, power, that we do have power. But mostly as a lawyer, I was looking at it as research for me, which they call me search. I was looking for something that could really help my family as I was floundering. As a lifelong feminist, as a child of a single mother, I was not going to partner lightly. And I think we get this advice, sort of this bad advice, it matters who you marry. Why that's bad advice is because the person you marry changes. Men do 5 to 15 hours a week less childcare and housework after kids come. Couples become more conservative, or at least men do, and women sort of have to trend with that. And with the trending of more conservative becomes a lot more resentment because the expectations of what you thought you were going to have change. And so you talk a lot about that motherhood expectations and power. And so I think that what we're talking about today, yes, it started with a text my husband Seth sent me that said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." That was true. I did have a breakdown in my car over being the fulfiller of my husband's smoothie needs. But
Mhm.
I think what I'm here to say is that if I just known in my car in 2011, when I had a newborn baby and a toddler, that "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries," the text from my husband was going to unleash a fire in me to understand what was going wrong, I would have been in a better place. And so again, as a lawyer, I sort of put I'm a researcher, I'm a mediator, I'm a lawyer. I work for families that look like the HBO show Succession, and you should feel bad for me. But what I do for those families is I do look at organizational behavior and design and the governance of highly complex organizations. So that's where my lens came in. The research became, could I look at the home as an organization? Is the home an organization? And if so,
Yes.
could I bring organizational scholarship that I used for my HBO show Succession families and see if they would work in average homes like my own? And the spoiler alert, because now we're in 25 countries, we have millions of people who have practiced fair play. We have a USC study showing that it works. It doesn't work to be introduced to the concepts. That does decrease marital satisfaction because we're increasing your knowledge. The
Hmm.
fair play works if you practice it.
Hmm.
So that's sort of where I come to this. I come to this as I need the Laura Maurice. I need you so badly. I need this podcast because I can't do the work of the data and the research and saying this works. This will help you unless I can convince women to come to the table with their own power. And that's why, I don't go on a lot of podcasts anymore because I'm doing a lot of work with the Policy Institute. But I really loved your voice and how you frame motherhood.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that and for joining us today. It's funny what you say about me search. I don't have that specific text with the blueberries,
Yeah.
but that is actually how we started in on this path. The same thing for us and my research partners. We realized that in this program about leadership, nobody was talking about mothers.
Right.
And yet every single thing we were talking about described mothers. And when you look at families and compare it to an organization, and you look at mothers and you compare it to leaders, there's a lot there.
Yes.
So I hear all of that, and I really appreciate all of that. And I don't usually use the word me search, but it
I
certainly applies.
yes. Well,
I mean, I'm trying to solve systems for myself, for the people I know, and for moms everywhere. It's a thing.
it's the thing.
You mentioned families and getting starting on this and when it works and doesn't. And I'm wondering if someone's not really in line with their partner or maybe just not in the same place yet, do you have tips for getting started or recommendations for the little steps to get us there or get us going?
Absolutely. The first little step I think is important is to understand what makes a successful organization. So, step one is that I need people to buy in to the fact that the home is an organization. And if you can just even buy in with that the home is an organization, it's people working together on shared goals and shared values. That's how I define an organization. And then if you
Absolutely.
believe me, then you can also take the next step to hopefully believe me that a successful organization needs three things. So, a successful organization needs boundaries, it needs systems, and it needs communication. And so, what I would say in terms of those small steps is see where you are. So, couples that come to me now, a lot of Gen Z couples are having kids, and I feel really confident about their ability to communicate. And so if I see a couple like that who's communicating when emotion is low and cognition is high, I will take them and direct them directly to the fair play system. And we can talk about what that is. But it's a system based on 100 cards. It's a card deck. It's a metaphorical card deck, but there's also a real card deck. And it's taking ownership of all the tasks in the cards. And we'll get, yes, there
Cards.
we go. And we'll get back to that. But I think the first small steps, if people are not, like you said, in the same page, then that senses to me that there's a communication or a boundaries problem. And so in that case, The most important thing is to start setting your own boundaries. So, Laura Marie, you help women do this, but we have to do some work on our own. And our own work, I think, has a lot to do with how we look at what a boundary is. And the way I've seen a boundary over the past, I guess I've been doing this now for 15 years, but a boundary is understanding that women's time is equal to men's time. And so for me, the reason my relationship changed wasn't because I got Seth to put the garbage liner back in the garbage bin, even though that was important to me. What changed our relationship was I was absolutely willing to say, Seth, you have 3 hours after our kids go to bed to work out, watch Sports Center, finish a PowerPoint deck. Whereas I am doing things in service of our home till my head hits the pillow, which is an hour and a half after you go to bed. And I'm no longer willing to live that way. Laura Marie, to get to a point where you can say that requires a lot of individual work. So whether it's listening to this podcast, whether it's listening to this podcast again, because there's a lot of triggers in this podcast, people get very emotional when they hear these things, whether it's doing your own work in therapy, we can't change other people, but we can change what we're willing to tolerate.
Wow, no, I feel that, and especially that piece of time. Like I said, there was no blueberry text, but there was a moment when my first was 5 months old, and it was something about the timing and going to work and tired after work and that kind of thing. And it was a realization, well, when is it
My time,
my work
right? Yeah,
day?
right.
Starts at 4 or 5 in the morning and ends, as you said, when my head hits the pillow. And there is no Saturday, Sunday, weekend time off. It's literally every day.
And by the way, my kids are a little older now, but weekends, when Friday afternoon would come, my heart would pound. The idea of having to fill 2 full days with toddlers, with sports, and that it was on me, again, it was not a tenable way to live, to dread your weekends as if it's a root canal.
At one point, I realized that going to dentist was kind of my time off.
That's the
As I
best.
laid
I
there on
love
the
it.
comfy thing and I would just close my eyes, and it's a very sad state of affairs, but it was true. It
Totally. A
was
drill in my
true.
mouth, laying down was more fun than being with my children for most of their lives so far.
No, I mean, I love them, and it's the nonstop, and it's the everything that they're getting and asking and needing from their mothers, and it just gets to be a lot. And so,
It's a lot.
weirdly, that dentist was the break for a while. Can we go back what you were saying about organization?
Yes.
When we're talking about mothers and leaders, has there been a time, maybe a period of growth or change, or where you've really seen those intersections? And when you see it, has it been a lot more with mothering expertise crossing over into your paid work, or was it more paid work that you use at home in your mothering?
Well, I love that. Definitely my paid work that I use in my mothering.
Okay.
And that gets back to the idea that as a lawyer, we look at the world in an interesting way that's different than therapists, but very important because, again, we need the individual work, boundary setting, systems work, communication work that therapists do. But as a lawyer, my paid work was very informational and important to my parenting because the way lawyers look at the world is we look at it as behavior design tools. So we're looking at ways to change behaviors. So if you think about if I wanted to stop cars from rolling over pedestrians in a intersection, I would put up a stop sign, but I wouldn't be asking each individual car, will you please stop? I would pass a law that says you'll go to jail if you run over a pedestrian in the crosswalk. So that's a behavior design tool. Laws are behavior design tools. And so I wanted to pass laws for my family. So that's really what the system is. So we talked a little bit about boundaries, right? That it's about understanding that our time is equal to men's time, right? That men's time is in a patriarchy is considered diamonds and women's time is sand. And that's just the world we live in. So when you fight back against that, right? If you don't believe me, just look at who the principals and the teachers call when a kid is sick, right? But I think the systems work is that laws and the governance. And what's so beautiful to me about the fair play system is I'm not telling anybody how to live. All I'm doing is rolling out a system of laws and governance that you can use. And all it's based on, it's predicated on one thing. If you decide to take the expectation in advance of doing something for the organization, the home organization, that you do it with full ownership, conception through planning through execution. And the reason why that came about and was so important and became the laws that I designed the home around was because I asked one question, Laura Marie. I asked many couples. I started with who handles groceries. I got weird data like we both do, and that didn't make sense because women were resentful and men were saying that they had no psychological safety in the home. They didn't exactly say psychological safety, but they were saying I'm being nagged. So I changed that question to how does mustard get in your refrigerator? And when I did that, everything changed because then I could go and ask women first and then men too, but they agreed that in 27 countries, whether it was the Nordic countries that we think are better and do everything more egalitarian, all the way to mainland China, women were the ones who told me they noticed that their second son, Johnny, didn't have enough protein because the pediatrician said they were iron deficient. And the only way that their child would eat steak was if it was doused in yellow French's mustard. That's conception in a project management framework. Then I heard from women that they were the ones who monitored the mustard for when it ran low. And they were also the ones who got stakeholder buy-in from the family for what they needed from the grocery store. Again, they didn't say stakeholder buy-in, but that's what I was listening for. That's planning. And then the reason why men were saying they both handled groceries was because there were men going to the store with their wife's brain, renting their wife's brain, their wife's conception and planning. But they're bringing home spicy Dijon every time where we ask for yellow. And so then women would come back to me and say, Eve, you want me to trust my husband with my living will? This dude can't even bring home the right type of mustard. And so what I was able to see in that data was I needed to design a system, a set of laws for the home where we were restoring what I was hearing was lost. The presenting problem is never the real problem. It wasn't about mustard. It was about the fact that accountability and trust were lost. And that's what we were restoring with the Fair Play system. A system of ownership restores accountability and trust. Because when you don't do something through and through, like an employee, if they make a mistake, you carry through that mistake. You don't say, I forgot to put the dollar under the pillow. I'm blaming you for not reminding me to put the dollar under the pillow. If you're the tooth fairy, you are the tooth fairy. You're responsible for waking up and setting your alarm at midnight, putting the gold coin or whatever under the pillow, getting the praise in the morning when your child wakes up and you get to see their beautiful face, being so excited about the magic. But that whole cycle is an ownership cycle. And that's what I'm hoping to instill in family life. And it's really the antidote to we'll figure it out, which is what I heard from so many couples.
Oh, yeah. No, I really love how you're going ahead and putting that organizational language directly to the family. And that is similar to what we were thinking in our research and why we knew we wanted to contact as many mothers as
Yes.
possible and hear their ideas because all of those traits and all of those skills that we do in leadership, whether it's that communication or the logistics or mentorship, all of those things are what the mothers are doing at home, but they don't necessarily get credit for those skills when it comes time for promotion, advancement, pay, and anything. And so it's really important to us to have that language. And then it's really funny when you start looking at you mentioned it before with the gender and how that mothering became women's work.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we have all of this organizational stuff that is very much men who got the
Correct.
wrong mustard
Right.
and,
Yes.
things like that. Is there on the timeline? I know that you have been busy and you have published another book since then, but I'm wondering if there is on the horizon anywhere a second set of cards because
Mm.
there are just so many things. And obviously, we can't necessarily hold them all physically or mentally. I don't know, but is there ever talk of that?
Well, I think what is interesting is that we've been doing this now for 10 years. And in literally 10 years in 27 countries, Laura Marie, everything is captured within the cards, meaning not the cards themselves, not just something that says cleaning. But if you go and hopefully you can put it your show notes, we can link to this. But we have a website called the Fair Play Policy Institute. And the most requested thing was for us to break down ownership. What does ownership look like for each of the cards? So I would say that if I was going to release something, it would be the CPE checklist, but they are there for people. So we have a full breakdown on our website if you want to go there, where if I say to you, I want you to own dentist, the dental card, it will have a checklist for you about what do you have to conceive of, what are you planning for, and what are you executing. And I do that for each of the cards, including all of the caregiving cards, all the magic cards, and all of the cards that are considered more rote, what we call the daily grind cards, like garbage, dry cleaning, dishes. As my sons say, who knew there were so many steps to laundry? Who knew you had to find the secret drawer? My son always calls it the secret drawer, and figure out where to put the liquid in. Or are you going to use a pod? Or is this time you're going to use the Woolite because it's a different type of clothes? And who knew there were 17 settings? And who knew that you had to set an alarm to remind yourself to take out the wash and put it in the dryer? And who knew that you needed to
New.
know? Right. Because it's a skill. That's the thing, right? These are skills. And so that's what the CPE checklist is trying to help people do. For those who haven't built those skills because they live in a patriarchy and their time has been protected from unpaid labor, we're here to rebuild the skills for you in Adulting 101 so that, again, the organization can function in a much easier way.
Adulting 101 is
Yes,
so
yes,
great.
yes. And how amazing would it have been if men had learned Adulting 101 before they came to the relationship? And I'm going to say something interesting, Laura Marie.
Please.
Even though you may think when you're dating that, well, my partner does the dishes or they can do their own laundry, like you may be looking for that, but I'm going to give you even a better, for any listener here who has people who are dating or kids who may be in relationships. The truth is that I can learn a lot more. Not, of course, I care if men do laundry and do dishes and get on their knees and clean a toilet. Like, I want to see that, right? That's what they're calling competency porn from the new show.
The Pit.
The Pit, yes. They call it competency porn. Of course, I want to see men doing that. But what I care even more about is the emotional labor. I can learn a lot more about whether men are going to be willing to change with their wives, to adapt to a child by questions like, what was the last gift you gave? Yeah.
I saw you that on social media, and that really is a good one. It's a really good one.
And I just did it. I did it this week with my son's friends.
Mhm.
One said, when I said, what was the last gift you gave? One gave me a deer in the headlights and said, I think my mom helped me get a gift card for my friend Jackson. And then the other person, my nephew, Noah, he was around the table. It was the Super Bowl when I asked that question. And he said, oh, well, you know, Eve, that I want my father to marry his girlfriend. And he's being really slow in asking her to marry him. So I signed up at my high school for a metallurgy class and I'm learning to make jewelry.
Gosh,
I'm making her an engagement ring. And I've tried 40 different tries and I'm finally perfecting it because I got her exact ring size, which is a 5 point whatever. And I decided to do it in copper because that's the color she likes the best. Which man am I more willing to think is going to be competent at cleaning up vomit later on when my kid is sick?
that is the sweetest thing.
It is the
And now
best.
I would love to see that ring. That's amazing.
I'll send it to you later.
Okay, we'll
But he
show
showed me all
everybody.
the tries.
Well,
It was really cool.
that is amazing. So if we switch gears for just a sec, will you tell us a little bit about Unicorn Space?
Yes, of course. So back to your mothering question. And again, what I've heard you bring up in your work, I love your P's. So I want to go back to your P's. I have 3 P's of my own. I want to add power though. I thought that was so beautiful. But I think I came up with 3 P's because they kept coming up in our surveys where we asked women what they're allowed to be. And we asked it in different ways, but that was the gist of the question. Like, what do you feel allowed to be? Meaning, like, if I said it out loud, I wouldn't get guilt and shame for it. So trapeze artists, for example, would be something that they didn't feel allowed to be. But women felt allowed to be 3 Ps. They felt allowed to be parents. They felt allowed to be partners. So they were doing something in service of their husband, like going to Macy's to replace their husband's underwear that has holes. They were allowed to be partners. And they were allowed to be professionals, if they were bringing in money, because we know that almost 70% of America are dual income couples. Women always earn less, though. Women always earn less because there's a pay gap. But what was interesting about why I felt like I had to write a second book was because there were too many stories that I left on the cutting room floor from Fair Play that were beautiful. And they were stories of women reclaiming themselves. It didn't have to be in midlife. It didn't have to be at the end of the life. It was just at different phases of their lives where they realized that there was more to life than those 3 Ps. And what I loved about it so much, like it was what you're doing here. It had 3 components in every aspect, whether it was trapeze artists or someone like you, Laura Marie, who have an audience. All the women that felt that they were reclaiming themselves felt that they had curiosity again in their lives. They felt that they had connection with others. They were sharing themselves with the world in some ways, and they felt there was a completion point. So that's why I'm bringing this back to your podcast, because again, even if it's your profession, I mean, obviously I want women to be greedy and have even more what I call unicorn space outside of just their profession. But a unicorn space is something that has curiosity, connection, and completion. And that's the opposite of what my friend called being a graveyard of unfulfilled dreams. And it was difficult to hear that. But she said that every time her GoDaddy account was up for renewal, she saw about 9 businesses or things she wanted to start. And
I would never.
she called it her graveyard of unfulfilled dreams day. And I thought it made me laugh, but it also made me think that if women can just start with one of those things, then they ultimately will get to a place where it's the opposite of burnout. And most of the women on our burnout scale, so we have a personal burnout scale that you can measure, people who had personal burnout scores that were coming down or they felt were changing over time or that they were less burnt out told me that they felt consistently interested in their own lives. So it was less about taking things off their plate and more adding things to their plate. So that was to me sort of counterintuitive. And so I felt like I needed to write about that.
No, it's really surprising when you say it that way because I can absolutely picture it. But no, I wouldn't have figured it was a positive thing as you add more to your plate.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, it can be.
And so to me, add more to your plate was something that I felt I was worried that if I didn't write a whole book about it, if I just did it in like a social series, women would start doing dumb things like, and I say that, sarcastically because I did it for years, but they would like sign up to be like the chair of the school picnic and more institutions would steal our time. And
Yes.
so I felt like I wanted to show what real examples were of getting back oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin and all the chemicals we need. And ultimately, it's this idea that I had an experience where I said to myself, I can't believe I just did that outside of my roles as a parent, partner, or professional. And so I highlight a lot of those examples in the book of self-determination and identity change and just women coming back stronger, where mothering allowed them to come back stronger in their leadership. But what I was looking for, and again, I love your dissertation, but
Thank you.
I was looking for an ancillary where it was almost like leadership in their own lives, not related to those 3 Ps. And some of these women were so cool. I talked to one woman who rang the red buzzer of American Ninja Warrior. She was a PE teacher. And she started off just doing like 2 pull-ups. And then she started swinging and then doing whatever that move is and where you hang. And slowly, slowly, she got more competency and she kept being curious. I wonder what would happen if I did this next thing. I wonder what would happen if I went to a parkour gym and I hung over the side of a squish rock with the finger holds. And then it became, I wonder if I shared this with the world, what it would look like to sign up for American Ninja Warrior. And the completion point is actually doing it. Even if
Yes.
you follow the water, she did
Yes.
it. And she became the oldest woman to ever ring the red buzzer. And there were just story after story. So that's what the Unicorn Space book is about. It's really a book for women who are ready to say, I want to be consistently interested in my own life.
Amazing. I love how you put it and her completion, not ringing the
Yes.
red bell, but making it to that point to have
That
that
was it. To
opportunity.
fall in the water. Exactly. And I think that what you just said was actually really important, Laura Marie, because I think too many people would have said their completion point should have been the red buzzer. And to be honest, that's why so many women don't start something, because it's not that they're not curious. It's that they're worried that their completion point will not look perfect. So let's just say completion is not perfection. Really, it's not perfection. I mean, I hate social media. I really don't like it. It's so annoying. And so what is the completion point, right? I mean, it's just getting on there, recording what I need to say and just stopping. You don't even have to edit it, but just we have to understand that a completion point is not perfection, because otherwise nothing would get out into
Right.
the world.
Right. And I think this is probably a great opportunity because I wanted to say a special thank you to you because obviously it's a big deal to have you here on our new
Thank you.
podcast. And this is our first season. And I would like to admit that I'm going to go ahead and call this a completion, the fact that we're doing it. And the reason I got here, I reached out to you, your team, the Black Hole on social media quite a while ago. I think possibly when I was even writing the dissertation, but since then, as this is taking on more of a life of its own. And when I went to Reese Witherspoon's Hello Sunshine last
Yes,
fall,
yes.
I maybe had my copy of Fair Play in my
Yes.
bag, like on the off chance you were there and you were going to sign it for me. And I didn't run into to you, but I did continue to reach out.
Yes,
And
yes.
your team reached back and they were just lovely. And I kind of told them about my research, what I was thinking of doing, kind of the rough idea and plans. And their and your interest really helped me solidify it. And when you all agreed to be a part of this podcast, I was like, I have to make sure this happens. And
Right,
so
right.
you were my very first interview, even though it's taken a while to get us into the same page. But definitely that was maybe it was the vote of approval. It was just the sign from the universe, whatever it was, to make me know that I can do this and it will work and we will get to that point. And I have all kinds of other plans going forward, but really just being here with you today and having this podcast appear because people aren't talking about mothers as leaders and they aren't making those comparisons and giving mothers that recognition. And when we went to work on the podcast, there weren't other podcasts talking about mothers as leaders. There's lots of leadership, there's lots of motherhood, but there's none of that crossover. And so we knew that it was an important thing to be talking about. And I set to work looking into things that I've never done before to make it
Mm.
happen. So here I am as a podcast host, and I have you to thank for it.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much for saying that. I really thought, again, as I was saying earlier, we do a lot with our policy institute. And so for my team to bring somebody to me, they know my criteria, right? I'm looking for someone who has unique research and a unique point of view. And then we just felt that about what you're doing, right? This idea that motherhood is leadership, leadership is motherhood, motherhood are leaders, mothers are leaders, the noun, the verbs, the adverbs, however you want to say it, those two need to be equated. And of course, society is not going to they'll equate motherhood to martyrdom, but they're not going to necessarily equate motherhood to leadership because I don't think that mothers being in the workplace is a priority to anybody, really. And promoting mothers in the workplace, we know it's the opposite, that the second you think you could be a mother, you start getting hit with a wage gap. So I just love that you're trying to disrupt that narrative.
Thank you. And that's how we even came to the name Motherhood Advantage too. There's lots out there about the motherhood penalty. Everybody knows it and talks about it,
Yes.
but we wanted to talk about the strengths and skills that mothers are bringing to the paid workplace. Back on that mothering piece, would you mind sharing nothing too personal, but something specific about your kids or a special time or a special attribute? Just something.
I'm thinking about my older son right now because he's applying to college or he will be soon. And what I think is so interesting is that probably because I brainwashed him and he was in the Fair Play documentary, I think at 11 years old, talking about embracing care work. But he's come to be an interesting kid where he's gravitating towards education, child studies. And he just found an interesting article in one of these, a listserv or something, where 95% of the people that are going into what they call the heal professions, helping education and literacy, are women. And we're talking about this male crisis of employment and men being lagging behind. But so sad for men because it's also the patriarchy. So that's what my son realized, that it's so rare to be a kid or a white man who wants to go into the helping professions because it's so frowned upon. He keeps saying men are in these spaces with kids, they're seen as pedophiles or they're not wanted there, or they get made fun of because all their friends are going to business school or in finance, or they feel like they can't date. So I think I'm doing a good job in that way, in that my older son is disrupting some of these care narratives. So that's what I'm thinking about because we were just talking about that this weekend.
I think that sounds like a great
Yeah.
thing.
The shout out to Zach. And then
And
I
I have a
think
Zach too.
you do? Yeah, Zach's are great. And I'd say, in terms of my middle son too, they're both older brothers to a younger girl. And I think it's really helped them normalize everything, normalizing care, understanding that when she was a baby, I wanted them to wipe her vagina from the front to the back so that, the poop wouldn't come back up into any crevices. All the things about a woman's body. Zach was like, Anna has hair under her armpit and she's 9 years old. Is that normal? Like just seeing the development of a young girl and being part of that care journey, I think is really important to me as a parent.
I agree. I agree. Your kids sound lovely.
Well, my middle one's a little difficult, so we'll see how he turns out.
I mean, it's a journey, right?
It's a journey. Every day is different, Laura Marie.
Yes, it
every
really
day.
is. I love it. They talk about leaders and uncertainty and change and adaptability. And I'm
Yes.
thinking, please tell me
Yeah.
more.
Bring it to us. There's nothing more rigorous in terms of teaching you how to lead in uncertainty than being a parent. You're correctly right.
Amazing. And one more question about paid workplaces and leadership. Either in your work as a lawyer or in your work with the Institute, have you seen policies or practices in the paid workspace that work well for mothers, or have you even instituted them or wished for them? Or what kinds of things have you seen and what do you like?
I think when organizations realize that flexibility isn't just where you work, it's how you work and when you work. Really, I think the organizations that have really embraced not just a hybrid workplace or putting some policies in place from HR, but understanding that, a flexible mindset is going to help an organization because it can be so much more diverse for so many more people. And that's why I just always laugh because the leaders that are trying to bring people back into the workplace 5 days a week are, they're all white men with stay at home wives. They really are. I can't find another leader that doesn't fit that profile. And so, what I would say about the paid workplace is the one thing that keeps me up at night is the fact that the 1% in America are white men with stay at home wives. And so they're just not going to have the same type of empathy for everything that goes on off screen. I'll give you one example. I was talking to a leader at a tech company who wanted to do some work with our institute. And he was really proud because he said, he found us because he really embraces fair play. And his point was that his wife is holding all the cards because he's been traveling a lot, but that he really respects her for holding all the cards, unpaid labor, and that she's a true partner in
Okay.
that. And I said, okay. And then he also was telling me that he has two single mothers on his team where he's a sponsor for them. He was really proud of that. But then later on in our conversation, he again brought up his wife and said to me why he was so grateful for his wife was because he couldn't do his job and have a family if it wasn't for her, that she's handling, everything off screen. And so then I said to him, I said, well, this is where the bias comes up, sir. You just, even though you're sponsoring those two single mothers that you're so proud of, you just told me those two single mothers couldn't do your job because you just said you could not do your job without a full-time wife doing all of the work off screen. So are you really going to think those single mothers can do your job if you said that you don't hold any unpaid labor? Because those single mothers do. They hold a lot of unpaid labor. And can you empathize with that? And so he got sort of mad. We never did anything together. I think he was a little defensive after that, but it did show me that the bias, even for really good allies, runs so deep in this arena.
It does. And I am trying and need to try harder about identifying and calling out those biases without being mean, but
I know. I'm
really
pretty mean at this point. Like women will say to me, sorry, my partner won't come to the table to discuss fair play. And I just say, well, you know what? Then it's about clarity. Like just leave. If you're not stuck, if you have the resources, get the out because if someone won't even to come to the table, I used to give a million tips and tricks for getting sort of problematic men to do 1%. At this point, I just want women out. I want women free from men that become their burden. I think what's interesting is that Fair Play has been a bestseller in South Korea for about 5 years, and now we're seeing the birth
hmm.
rates there are the lowest they've ever been. So I'm not going to completely take
So
credit,
it's your fault.
but I'm pretty happy with that because my whole thing is fair play is really a clarity tool. Again, it works. When you practice in the system, like it actually works. We
Mhm.
we see the personal burnout scores go down, we see marital satisfaction, sexual relations go up. But if you know about fair play and you know your partner won't ever agree because they have such toxic messages like, well, if you're so overwhelmed, you can just get help, or I make the money, so I'm not entitled to doing any unpaid labor. Like, if that's the mindset of those men, then the clarity has to be that they're probably not going to change.
The hard but honest truth.
The hard but honest truth. And by the way, that's why a lot of people say these conversations require a trigger warning because it's painful. It's painful to look at what society does to mothers. It's so painful.
It is. It is. If I were on the Institute website, would I find a sample trigger warning there?
No, but I probably should put one. That's a great idea.
Well, we'll add that to the show notes as well
Yes.
as the
Remind
link so
me.
that yes,
Yes.
so people can contact you and see the Fair Play book and the cards and unicorn space and
And by the way,
we
can I say one thing? One thing about
yes.
if you're with somebody who's not going to change and you're not ready, obviously, to take these drastic steps. So many people have entered fair play unwittingly because a woman has set a boundary to do a unicorn space. It's so cool. So I'll give an example. Like there was this woman who owns a yoga studio in Santa Barbara, and she decided she was going to row across the Pacific Ocean. And
Okay.
she was holding all the cards. And her partner became such an equal partner, such a good owner of the fair play cards, because he really wanted her to succeed in her mission of rowing across the Pacific Ocean. And they did. They were like a four-man crew. And I can link to her story in the show notes. But I loved her partner so much because there are partners who say, I see you and I see you in your full self and I want to support you in that full self. And then realize that that's the entry point to fair play because you can't really support someone in their full self if they're practicing on the Pacific Ocean for weeks and months, if they're not also going to pick up childcare shifts and do the dishes and the laundry and help with homework. So that's also a great entry point into fair play by picking a unicorn space that you take seriously.
I like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned mission and it made me think, have you heard what's been happening on the Artemis mission and the mother on board, what she said?
Well, I want to hear what she said on board.
Well, this was, I think, from one of the interviews, and then it made a meme going around. But she was talking about this is not like the International Space Station where you can call and ask where the thing is. And somebody rightfully noticed, wow, her husband called the space station to ask about the things, and it just really brought the humanity of that mom's in space for
Wow,
me.
wow, wow. He's calling her on the moon, being like, where's Hudson soccer?
But he can't call on the moon, so he's gonna have to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I will say I got to speak to NASA during the pandemic, and it was really cool. I'm actually more interested, and I need to find out more about the Artemis. There is a dad on the plane, and I believe he's a single dad. And so I need to understand how he was really worried about going on this mission because he was going to have to leave his daughters for 3 weeks. And so I need to find out more about how he looked at his, unpaid labor in the home and how he redistributed. Because I think that's right. I think he was a single dad. That's what I remember.
I hope you will get a hold of him and that you will report back to all of
I
us.
will. I will.
There are so many great stories out there and so many great and heartbreaking examples. And it's just really nice to be in community and the work that you've done to put names to things. And yes, the physical cards to these very real tasks that go into mothering and running a household has just been really powerful and validating
Thank
to
you.
have that. So I really do appreciate that and having you here. Are there any last words that you wanted to share with us?
Well, first of all, I love the flowers behind you. That makes me really happy. But yes, I think, first of all, I wanted to say thank you for stepping into your full power and using your voice, Laura Marie, because it's scary to wade into these subjects. So, what I want to end with is that I think the reason why some of this can feel so painful, I really had to contemplate why is it that presenting the same Trello, the same Asana, the same comparable organizational systems for the home feels so much more difficult to adopt than if it was in a workplace? And then I realized, well, we're not just offering management and organizational tools for the home. Our messaging, what Laura Marie's doing, what I'm doing, we're counteracting 2,000 years of religious patriarchy. And so I think when you realize that, asking your partner, asking a school to call your partner first is not just one task on your to-do list. It's trying to reset norms that have been in place for 2,000 years. Then you're going to realize how powerful of a warrior you are just for doing that. Just for getting the school to call your husband, just for getting your amazing teenage boys to make that metallurgy gift. Those are victories because it is not just a task on a to-do list. It's not just a chore or a housework task. This is our humanity, and this is how culture is shaped. So that's what I want to leave everybody with. Every small micro thing you do that leads to a more fair home is counteracting 2,000 years of messaging that would have said the opposite. And so that's what I want to leave us with. It's hard work, but the work is worth it. Your podcast, Laura Marie, is worth it. And again, whether we have 1 follower or we have 1 billion followers, somebody's going to hear this message and it's going to resonate with them and it will make it worth it for you and me.
Thank you so much, Eve Rodsky. I'm Dr. Laura Marie Rivera, and that is our Motherhood Advantage. Thank you. Motherhood Advantage is based on the idea that if mothers are trusted to nurture, protect, and shape the next generation, their expertise should be recognized everywhere leadership matters. These episodes build on the work of Intuitionship, a groundbreaking research study with nearly 1,000 mothers, and now a nonprofit continuing to explore that intersection of motherhood and leadership. If you'd like to learn more, make a donation, or recommend a remarkable mother, please visit us at motherhoodadvantage.com. This podcast is hosted by Dr. Laura Marie Rivera and edited by Liz Aderholt, and is dedicated to all of the mothers who keep the world running, because motherhood may just be the most powerful leadership training ground in the world.